Okay, what we're going to be learning how to do today is make a Twilight style vampire. So the first thing we obviously do is open up the document we want to be working with. Then what we want to do is crop this picture to the size that we want it to be. For today's activity, so there's the crop tool, I want the size to be 1920 pixels, px, by 1080 pixels. I want to be using the view of rule of thirds, and I do not want to delete the cropped pixels. Now right now this is the right dimensions, but when I'm looking at this with the rule of thirds, I can see where those lines would be lining up. And what I want is the point of interest to be right where those lines are. So I'm going to put the eyes along this line on the third, and I'm going to be putting the head centered right there, and move that down some. And so this is now following the rule of thirds. I press enter, and the picture has now been cropped the way I want it to be cropped. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this layer. So right over here in the layers area, I'm going to go right down here. Actually, I'm going to right click on this, and I'm simply going to say duplicate layer, and I'm going to call this the main picture. That way I can remember what this is. And so right here it says main picture. The reason I do this is so that I have a copy of it to work with, and if I make any mistakes I can always go back to the original document right there, which is the background. At this point I now need to work with the vibrance. So what I'm going to do is go right down here and click on vibrance. And what I want to do with this one is vibrance pretty much lets me change the tonalities, the skin color, and that kind of stuff. And it usually you would be moving this number up to make the skin pop and the eyes pop more. But because we're making a vampire, we're actually going to be doing the opposite. So we're bringing this down approximately. It's going to work with each person. It's going to be a little bit different. But I'm looking at this at about 50 vibrance, and probably I'm going to guess about a plus 20 for saturation. And then I just simply press, or to minimize it again. Then the next thing I am going to do is I'm going to add another, or I'm going to add another layer. And I do that by clicking right here, which simply says new layer. And I'm going to call this layer here by right-clicking on it. I can go to rename, or I can just click right there where the word layer is. And I'm going to call this one skin, because I'm about to begin working on this skin. So what I want to do here is adjust this a little bit. My opacity, that's how much I can see through things. I'm going to bring this down to 60 because I'm going to be painting on the skin the color white to make him look more like a vampire. So I want to be able to paint the color white on it, but I still want to be able to see through it. So I'm going to change the opacity to about 60. I'm going to change the fill to about 70. And I want the lighting on this to be a soft light. With those things changed, I am simply going to go over here to my color picker, and I'm going to pick the color white. So I double click on that, and I pick one of the cleanest whites right there. And now I'm simply going to go to my paint brush tool, and I'm going to zoom in on the skin first actually. And I'm simply going to start painting. I can change the paintbrush size up here. And doing kind of a fast round on this. You kind of want to go with the same basic shape of the face. And there will definitely be times when you're going to want a smaller brush to get the smaller details. So I'm just going to go right along there. I'm going to go off screen for a second while I finish painting this in, although I look like I'm pretty much done as is. So I just paint over all of the skin areas. So I will pause the screen and do that. And once you're done painting, you might want to look at the opacity. And you can see by changing the opacity, you're going to be able to do some fast changes to the skin to see what you personally like best. And with each person's skin color, this would be a slightly different number and that kind of stuff. So that's just going to be something you're going to need to work with. Once you have done that, what I want you to do is add another layer. So we go right down here to New Layer, create a new layer again. And we're going to click right up here so we can give it a name. And we're going to call this one the eyes. And at this point, once again, I'm going to quickly go over to the magnifier and I'm going to zoom in on the eyes. And now that I've zoomed in on the eyes, I can also see where I might want to do a little bit more painting to get this a little bit fixed on the skin again. So if I did that really quick, as long as I'm here, go back to the paintbrush. Just a way to, whenever you get a chance and you see an opportunity to make things better, you should take them. And now I'm going to click back on the eyes layer to make sure I'm working on that layer. And then I'm going to go over to the pen tool and I'm going to begin clicking around the eye. And once I close the path, it looks like this and those dots disappear. I can then begin working on the other eye. And now both eyes have been selected, so I'm going to right click, and from here I'm going to click on Make a Selection. And I want the feather radius to be around 3. I want an anti-alias done, and I'm going to say New Selection, and when I do that, I press OK. And this has become a selection. And I'm going to go right down here to where it says Create New Fill or Adjustment Layer, and I click on that. And I'm going to go up to where it says Exposure, and I'm going to make my exposure. Once again, it's not an exact number. I kind of play around until it looks the way I want it. And it's going to be pretty much close to around 3 for most of us in this class. And then I can minimize this now. And I'm going to create a new layer by clicking right here, Create a New Layer. And on this new layer, I'm going to call it, so I click right there to rename it, Pupils. And I'm going to go over to my paintbrush tool again, and I'm going to this time select a color black, so go all the way down there. And I'm going to resize my paintbrush. It'll be different for each person depending on how much eye you're choosing to show. And now we've got our pupils. I'm going to now click back to my exposure layer. And I'm going to right click and say select Add Mask to Selection. And so now I've got this part selected. And I'm going to now pick a solid color. So I am going to go down here and pick solid color. And the color that I want, for most of us, it's going to be with the red around 130, the green around 80, and the blue around 1. And I'm going to press OK. And here, instead of having this at normal, I'm going to make this called an overlay, which lets you see over it. And now once again I need to make another layer, so I'm going to get up here to pupil so that this next layer will be on top of that. And I'm going to call this one the shadows. I'm going to click right on that. I'm going to say shadows. And at this point I am simply going to pick a gray. So A grade is basically where the red, the green, the blue are all around 55. And I press OK. And at this point I want to be painting with my opacity, how much I can see through it, around 55, 60. And I want to make sure my fill, same thing, is going to be around 55, 60. I'll start off at 50. And once again, I like my light to be a soft light when I'm working on people. And now I'm simply going to begin darkening up the eyes some. And I'm going to make that opacity just a little bit darker. And just kind of coloring that in some. Just a little bit underneath the eyes. Most of it goes right through here. And now when I zoom out, we've got our basic vampire. So this is what the end product looks like compared to, so we started with this, and it's not a big change. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to just be that common vampire from Twilight. Now, at this point, you could consider yourself done. Then what you would do is you would get down to this basic level down here, or your background layer, and you would delete all of this. You would erase the background, and then below that layer you would create a new layer, and in that layer you would simply paste the background. So right down here you would have your background layer, the untouched one. You would have layer 2, which was just created, and then you would have your background copy, the one that we did at the very beginning, with all of the background. You can either erase it, well, you would erase it, and then you would have something like this.